I hope you had good and interesting discussions and also got further guidance on the different topics which we try to elaborate a bit further in the workshops. And what we would like to try to do now is to give a short wrap-up of each of the 3 workshops with the 3 rapporteurs who participated in the workshop. So maybe I start first with workshop number 1, which was on the incentive effect, which already was discussed also this morning, where the workshop was chaired by Klaus Junger-Dittel, and Yvonne Simon was the rapporteur, and she will brief us on the main points of the discussion. Yvonne, please.
Okay. I will start with a short description of the case that we've been looking at. We had a regional aid scheme that was put into effect by a member state, and the member state considered that it fits fully with the GBA 2014. Already, shortly after putting into effect of this aid scheme, a medium-sized enterprise applied for aid under this scheme, and the aid was granted. It was for an investment in a city A, on which I will come back later. And the start of work took place after the written application for aid was handed in. Then it's also important to note that in line with the text of this GBA scheme or presumed GBA scheme, no additional information about the incentive effect was provided by this company. Now it turned out, also after a complaint from a competitor, that in fact the member state did not fully comply with the publication requirements concerning this scheme, and that the full text of the aid scheme was published too late according to the GBA rules. Now this had very important impacts on the way the incentive effect had to be checked for this scheme. And it was no longer sufficient to comply with the rules of the GBA, because the GBA could not apply to the scheme. But then we went to check the scheme against the rules of the regional aid guidelines. And then we had a discussion: can we apply the rules under the regional aid guidelines that apply for schemes, or do we have to apply the additional rules which apply for individual aid? And since there are some higher requirements or more detailed requirements concerning the application form for schemes that are notified under the GBA, and also for large companies, that you basically have to provide a counterfactual scenario. What would happen in case that the aid is not granted? What happened if the aid is granted? And this all is missing. It was not possible to use the section for schemes under the regional aid guidelines, but we had to go to the increased requirements concerning individual aid. And this then basically means that you check whether the investment would either not take place at all without the aid, or would not take place in the assisted region without the aid. And then we had specific figures looking at the internal rate of return. As the case was set, we had that the normal or expected internal rate of return for such an investment of the company was 10%. And that the place where the aid was granted, according to the internal documents of the company, the internal rate of return was already 11%. Whereas in another city it would have been lower, but for the place where the aid actually had been granted, it was already above what the company normally expects as level for internal return to do such an investment. So based on the full incentive effect rules requirements of the regional aid guidelines for individual aid, it was not compatible. What happened with the aid granted to this company M was not compatible with the requirements of the of the regional aid guidelines. We then went to, in the second part of the workshop, we also went to reflect a bit, are there ways in which we possibly may help Company M to keep at least part of the resources. It's a tricky thing. It's not fully explored, and a way out could possibly be if it is granted as an SME aid ad hoc, and after notification, then aid intensities in the range of 10% or so should still be possible. Yeah, but the clear message is you member states have to make sure that you really do fit under the GBA, because concerning the requirements for the incentive effect, you will end up in really difficulties if the more intense and more difficult rules of the regional aid guidelines apply. So please make sure that if you want to have a GBA scheme, that you have complied with all the requirements, including the publication requirements of the general block exemption regulation.
Thank you, Yvonne. That's a clear message to take home, I think, for the representatives here of managing authorities and other national administrations. I don't know, Klaus, is there something you would like to add, or this was a good summary? Or
summary, thank you.
Thank you for that compliment to Yvonne. Thank you, Yvonne and Klaus, for the first workshop. In the second workshop, we discussed the SME definition, or the definition of SMEs and how to apply this. Our colleagues Erika Vink from DG Comp and Katrien de Spiegelaar from DG Grow chaired the workshop. And Camille, my colleague Camille from DG Regio will brief back on the discussion in that workshop. Camille?
Okay, thank you very much. So we also had a very interesting and enlightening workshop and discussion. It should be said and noted that the SME definition falls under the remit of DG Growth. There has been said and pointed at, and we will also publish on our website a link to the user guide to the SME definition from 2015, which also attaches the Commission recommendation from 2003, based on which our discussion were based. We also learned that DG Grow will soon publish a self-assessment tool, which we'll publish on DG Growth, and we will provide a link on our website, on the seminar website. DG Growth is basically the right contact point for this topic. I needed it myself recently, and there's a email when you type into Google who to contact. Definition, SME definition, you get an email, grow-SME-definition at ECI.eu. We may also put it on our website. And this guide, as we discussed, this is where the definition is clear. But what if the conditions are met on paper, but there is a link through natural persons? Actually, thanks to Fedon, we were introduced to this topic already in the morning with this nice chart of the company, subject of the case, who introduced the linked enterprises. So we revised the various situations that the companies could be linked through majority share, through voting rights, through influence on management, that someone appoints or can nominate a board, and also through a dominant influence through contract. We, for example, discuss a case when one company is a supplier of the other one is a unique dominant, or for example by 90%. Well, these are situations when the enterprises are linked, but also this may also happen through a relationship of natural persons, like a family, which are acting jointly, either in the same or adjacent markets. they, for example, share resources utilization, they have the same bank or accountant or suppliers. We were presented with ideal cases which were results of court disputes. However, in reality, people in the managing authorities or intermediary bodies have only fractions of this information available to them. And there the discussion kicked in our workshop, and we asked what shall we do? And certainly the answer was that there's a reason for a red flag, and the direction to that would be either because the burden of proof of the SME handicap is on the side of the, let's say, managing authority or the decision-making body. So either they have sufficient information for their decision to reject the application that the enterprise is not an SME, or they would have to run additional query, for example, to ask additional information to get to the knowledge which we learn from the cases. But we also discussed that the investigation of bodies which you represent should be proportional because you have limited time, resources, and sometimes also rights. There's a data protection issue, etc. We also learned from members, from participants, that some use self-declaration when applicant attaches it to the application. In, for example, Portugal, there's a body dedicated to SME certification, which certifies the definition. There are some other assessments of SMEs. We also pointed to the tool of Arachne, which may be a useful source of information. Then in some member states, particularly the small ones, there are networks, or also reading newspapers, other media, and also knowing the enterprises and the right people, and putting this information together. So this was our workshop.
Thank you, Camille, for the summary. I don't know if Erica and Katrina are still here, or yeah, Erica, you still would like to add something, or okay. Thank you as well for the compliment for the summary. And what I understand, indeed, there's a bit of this friction between, on one hand, the definition of SME, but how to investigate it. So everybody can understand the definition, but how to investigate in reality, and there are different ways and tools available, but it's not always 100% perfect to find always the linkages between different stakeholders in companies. So also thanks to the three of you for workshop number 2. And then we move to the last workshop, workshop number 3, which was chaired by 3 ladies, Katrien de Mares, Katja Topercher, and Ursula Romanska. And also a lady is going to report back from the workshop. Denise, please.
Thank you, Pascal. So I'm the last one. In our workshop, we went through the notification requirements of the GBER, not all of them, but only the one that concerns relocation of enterprises. In order to do so, we had a case of an SME that in member state Y was having some economic activity. They were producing TV sets and videos, and they reduced last year part of their staff. So before, in 2000, for example, in order to produce the television sets, they reduced the number of people from 90 people to 40 people. And this SME is also intending to move to a C region in country X. And without the aid, the SME would settle in a non-assisted region. And we assume, in our case, that state aid is involved and only regional aid is concerned. We had a long, interesting discussion in both workshops, and we arrived to 5 main elements as conclusions. And I will always, with each element, I'll give you some examples and go through this. So what you need to take into account for relocations? The GBER requires you to notify always in following cases. We always look at the beneficiary at group level, regardless, for example, the amounts involved and the forms of undertaking. So even if a very small amount is involved, and even if a very small undertaking is involved, you have to, then we need to take it into account. So everything matters. We need to have a look also at closures which happened in past 2 years and which are going to happen in 2 years in the future. And the 2 years for the future, we count it as of completion of the operations. The third element is we look always at the same economic activity. In order to do so, we look at the NACE codes. And so we always have a look at the same NACE codes per establishment. So in an establishment within one country, you can have several economic activities, but we always look at the relevant NACE code, at the relevant economic activity. There was a discussion, for example, what happens if the NACE classification can be vague, and in one country, in one member state, you can register under different codes than in the new member states where you come to. Then this is a way how to circumvent. We were also discussing whether, for example, if you have within one member state, whether the company relocates their activities within one member state, whether they have to notify or not. And according to our colleagues, we arrived to the conclusion that no, if it concerns only one country, you don't need to notify because we keep it as discretion for one country, how they deal with their region development. But if it concerns 2 different member states, then you need to notify. And I know that here in the audience, we have people from the ESI worlds, from structural funds, and then the CPR, the Common Provision Regulation, has a bit different approach. For example, if you reallocate from one region, one type of region to another, then it concerns reprogramming, then it's a bit different. And then the last element, we were discussing the aspects of the full and partial closure. And of course, also partial closure counts, because then you would have few people left and it would not have been taken into account. And as a partial closure, we take into account the reduction of by 50% of the jobs or 100 jobs, which, for example, for a large enterprise, 100 jobs seems very few, but which is a lot for a smaller enterprise. That's why we have this 50%. And I wanted just to come back to a few cases also we discussed, if I find them. So for example, we had an example. What to do if a country asks or claims, we had to close, but this is not relocation, because we would have to close anyway. It's always up to the Commission to decide and to find the link between the closure of activities and reallocation. So it's not about the discretion of the beneficiary, but about it's up to the Commission to decide. The second point I wanted to find here is, yes, you know that the GBER, the new GBER came into force in as of 1st of June 2014. What happens if a closure took place before the date, and if the aid was granted before the date, then no notification is needed because the rules are not retroactive. But even if the closure took place before, but the aid was granted after the 1st of June, then the rules apply, the provisions apply. And my last one was here. It's for you quite obvious one. When we have, for example, an undertaking that relocates from one member state to another, but they change legal entity. And it's not enough to change the legal entity. We always look at the group level. This is the element, the first element I mentioned in the conclusions. I hope I didn't mix it up everything looking at my colleagues. Thank you.
Maybe, I don't know if Katrina or Katja want to add something, or you're happy with the summary?
Happy with the summary.
Good. Thank you, and thank you
Thanks.
again also for the compliments. Camille, you want to add something, you said?
I just wanted to add, because there was a question which we were not sure about the answer in our workshop on definition of SME. So the criteria for SME definition need to be fulfilled at the time of signing the grant contract.
I said at the time of the granting of the aid, and whether this is the contract is typically this is the case, yeah. But you need to, if SME is a requirement, you need to be an SME at the point of the granting of the aid. And what is the granting of the aid is an assessment. Typically, you are right, it is the contract.
Clear, I hope. Otherwise, we organize the next workshop on this topic specifically. Good. Thank you also for the colleagues who are organizing and holding the third workshop. And I think what I liked also, I participated in your workshop with the 5 very concrete recommendations to follow up. And I think the 5 clear lessons to draw lessons and to take from this workshop. So thank you for briefing back on the 3 workshops. And before I wrap up and draw the main conclusions of this seminar, I would like to give to all of you as participants the last opportunity to ask questions or to make comments to some of the speakers. So if there are any comments or questions you still would like to raise, now is the moment, and otherwise I will conclude. Good, thank you. I think there's no questions. If I see correctly, then I would like to wrap up. So first of all, I hope where we've maybe probably not been able to answer all your questions in detail today, because some of the questions were also very detailed, and which always requires a bit further internal reflection. But I hope, and I'm quite sure, that we gave you further guidance and further ways of thinking of how the Commission works on the state aid rules for regional aid and for SMEs. So at least on the basis of the cases in which were also discussed during the workshops, I hope it has helped you to further understand the system, how it works. But I also and generally want to thank you for your questions and for your input and for your comments, because it also helps us, and especially also the colleagues in DG Competition, but also the colleagues in DG Regio, to be confronted with the daily questions you meet and the questions you deal with, which also we need to internalize in our thinking, and also perhaps in modifying some of the regulations under GBER or maybe in the structural fund regulations. So really thank you also for that input, and I think that was useful. It was really a kind of a two-way direction during the seminar, and that's also what we were hoping for. Also, we hope that you will feel a little bit like well, maybe a bit strong word, but a bit like ambassadors of the training today, at least that all the information you have gathered today and also the documents which we'll distribute with you, that you will distribute this further to your colleagues back home, to your colleagues in other managing authorities, intermediate bodies, national administrations, audit authorities, etc. So we really see this as a bit of a kind of a train-the-trainers program. So really, I really would encourage you to share this information as widely as possible back home. All the documentation, all the presentations you saw, and also, for example, the documentation on this definition of SMEs will be uploaded on our website of InfoRegio, and under the section how to improve better management of the funds. And I think we will also send you a link. I think to all the participants you will receive a link where all these documents will be uploaded. So, and there you will find also the information from all the two previous seminars as well. And so all the information linked to state aid, linked to the management of the funds, can be found on this website. The evaluation, we will also ask the organizers of this seminar will also send you a short evaluation form after this seminar. And I really would ask you to give us honest, even if it's also critical, but honest but constructive feedback, which we can use also for organizing next seminars. Was the right level of information? Were the topics you were missing? Could have been organized in a different way? Are there topics which you would like to suggest for next seminars? Are there other modes how we can discuss this with you? We're open for all kind of recommendations, and we'll see how we can include this in our work. As I said this morning in introduction, this seminar was not a standalone seminar. It's part of a wider action plan between DG Comp and DG Regio. And I just would like to repeat that the next seminar in the same setup as today will take place on the 1st of December, and which is dealing with transport. We plan probably to organize 2 more seminars in 2017 in the first half. We have already some topics in our mind, but we also open to listen to your suggestions. We think about broadband, maybe environment, but there might be some other topics as well. And also, as I said this morning, next to these thematic seminars, which are more focusing on experts, we see you really as experts in this specific domain, we will also organize more, let's say, basic training seminars on state aid, together with the European Institute of Public Administration. And they are really targeting those colleagues who are managing the funds back home. So really the managing authorities, intermediate bodies, audit authorities and certifying authorities. And the first 2 sessions take place on the 23rd and 24th of November this year, and 8th of 9th December. Depending on the interest, we will also organize more modules if people are sufficiently interested. The setup is about 30 people, 30 to 40 people, 2-day trainings presented by the trainers from IPA, and also where colleagues from DG Comp will be present for question and answer sessions, so for discussing specific questions. So this is all from my side, so thank you once more to you, first of all, for participating today and for your input. And special thanks to my colleagues from DG Competition and my own colleagues from DG Regio, and also colleagues from DG Grow, who helped in organizing and preparing and implementing this seminar, and also to Applica, which is the organization which has been doing all the logistics for the seminar and which organized also all the invitations you got from them. And having said this, I would like to, for those people who have to travel back home today or tomorrow, I wish you all a very good and safe trip back home, and hope to see you soon at the next seminar. Thank you very much.